There it hangs, suspended in gloom, glowing dimly in darkness. A beacon there to inform us that there is always a way out. But don't go just yet. We have such wonderful things to show you. This is the Exit Light Podcast. Good evening. Welcome back to the Exit Light Podcast. I am your storyteller, Eli Beals. It has been a while since I've put an episode out into the world, and how the time flies. I suppose now is as good a time as any to continue. So let's just call this Episode 1 of Season 2. Does your family have an odd tradition? Something steeped in generations past? Mine were pretty mundane, such as going out to dine at a restaurant every Friday. Before we could eat, though, my stepfather would insist on praying, beseeching some omnipotent force to bless our meal. Perhaps he felt obligated to do it, or maybe he was afraid of what could happen if he was negligent in his observance. A part of me recognized this, even though the drool-inducing aroma from the pepperoni tempted me as I patiently suffered through his droning. Once blessed by our God, would this delicious pizza really imbue me with the power he was invoking? Would it really nourish and strengthen our bodies and minds? Would Steve, in accounting, be smote by his divine wrath, and that dead patch on our lawn flourish once again, so the neighbor would stop teasing my stepfather about it? Would the deep one rouse from his eternal sleep to impose gruesome misfortune on that jerk who had cut him off that day on his morning commute? I really didn't care. I just wanted some pizza. But I tolerated the whole thing because it was worth it. Because it was family stuff. In this story, we learn about a reclusive family and the strange happenings in their mountain home on a yearly basis. Enjoy. When I was old enough to start asking questions, like real questions, such as, why is the sky blue, and why does coffee taste like dirt, and of course, where does that man come from? As much as my folks did not want to say, thinking maybe it was a grown-up thing that I shouldn't worry about yet, they told me. It's not often that a child gets the full truth. Usually it's some glossed-over, sugar-coated, fluffy kid version. No, they said it right there and then. Maybe it was to see how I would react to one of life's harsh realities. "Well, son," my dad said as he settled back into his armchair, which meant I was in for a story. "We don't really know where he comes from. We just ease him on his way to the hereafter." My dad said this in the same manner as when our family dog got really sick, and he had to ease him on his way to the hereafter. It was a kindness, really. That kind of suffering is just cruel business, letting it go any longer. Same with that fella that shows up every year on the same day and same time as sure as day follows night, and has been for about 100 and some odd years. Your great-granddaddy was the first to see him, putting down stakes here up in the mountains. Wanted to get away from the city, you see. Great Depression had a lot of folk desperate. No work, no food, nothing but bad news, he would say. So he set out and became a mountain man, living off the land and such. What he wasn't expecting was visitors. None that had any good intentions, you see. So the first time the man came running out of the cave, he flat out shot him, only realizing after that fella was in bad shape. Parts of him missing, burned, just awful. Gave him nightmares for a good long while. Then a year passed and the same thing happened again. This time your great-granddaddy tried to help the man. He was so badly wounded that he died not 20 minutes later, screaming till his last breath. This happened like clockwork every year since. And we've just dealt with it. Kind of a family tradition. Fearing telling anyone about it would just bring unwanted attention. Government kind, you see. After he got the house built, he went into the moonshine business. Not strictly legal now, but very illegal back in those days. So for the last 100 years, we just greeted the poor bastard with a bullet as soon as he shows up. Then we put him in a hole, say a few words, and get back to it. He paused then, perhaps waiting for me to ask more questions in that obstinate way children do when the answer provided was not enough for them. Maybe I didn't want to know more, or was stunned into silence by the knowledge that my family had been shooting and killing a man every year and burying his body somewhere in the woods for 3 generations. Each one of these men had nothing on him, save for one of these. He went to a chest near the fireplace and pulled out a wood box, brought it over to me. I knew about the box, and had snuck a peek at the objects inside once or twice. There were chunks of heavy, dark stone, ribboned with something even darker. Probably iron, or some other heavy metal. My face must have went white when he told me about where they had come from, since he smiled sadly and closed the box. His face got real serious as he leveled with me. Looking me square in the eye, he said, "Son, I'm not going to be around forever, and this job is going to be yours someday, so next year, you're coming with me to ease the man to the hereafter." His eyes were soft, regarding me solemnly, and smiled when I nodded in agreement. "That's my little man. All right, let's cook up some of that deer, huh?" My parents only came up to the cabin, as we called it, for a couple of months out of the year, as my granddaddy had taken his father's trade and turned it into a full-fledged, legitimate business, providing neutral grain spirits to various companies to make their own labels. Nice behind-the-scenes trade. If you've ever had a pre-mixed canned cocktail, chances are pretty good the alcohol came from my family's distillery. The end of the trip was usually marked by that grim task. I just knew by the look on my daddy's face that it was time to go home, and that the family tradition had been seen to. So, 1 year later, on or around the summer solstice, we found ourselves at the entrance to the cave, an almost perfect triangular opening, as if 2 halves of the mountain had come together right there and didn't quite settle, leaving a gap. My daddy watched our shadows shrink. When they were directly beneath us, he raised his rifle and aimed at the cave opening. I think I was holding my breath because it seemed like a long time before it happened. Something in the air, a weird, vibrating sensation, rippled through my whole body. I could feel the hairs on my arm poke straight up, and then we heard him. Hollow-throated, agonized screams erupting from the dark triangle in the mountain. My daddy just stood there, solid as a statue, and just as calm. "Any second now," he said. Then the man emerged, blinded by the sunlight, but still staggering forward towards us. One shot thundered from the 308, and the man crumpled to the ground. Then it was quiet again. Aside from the bullet hole, it appeared to me like this man had climbed himself right out of the fiery pit of hell. His toes and fingers were blackened stumps, as well as his nose, and just about any small body part that protruded or dangled from him. Hairless and smelling strangely like overcooked bacon. I once saw a deer that got struck by lightning. That kind of reminded me of the man. But this guy looked as if he were struck multiple times, or just somehow rode a bolt of lightning here, crazy as that sounds. What really shook me, though, is even despite all the damage, there was something familiar about him. Mostly, it was the cheekbones, high and broad like my dad's, and though his eyes were completely flooded with red, the irises were a gray-blue like mine and Mama's. Handing me the rifle, my daddy crouched down and plucked one of those rocks from the man's chest. I could see him twist at it, and eventually managed to pry it off of him, as if it were glued to him or something. Out of the duffel bag we pulled out a tarp, some twine, but we left the shovels. Those would be for later. It's hard work digging in the mountains. Once you get down a foot or so, you typically hit clay or just really dense dirt. I wasn't much help digging the grave, but my daddy had a chance to rest as I filled it back in over the man. After the burial, we placed a chunk of white fleck granite over the mound, and just then I realized that the grove had dozens and dozens of similar stones, all spaced out like in a cemetery. Sharing this event with me must have weighed less on my old man because he didn't seem as grim as he had the previous year. He even smiled and teased me about the huge blister on my thumb that had inflated to the size of a nickel. "That's gonna sting when Mama puts some antiseptic on it, boy." Ho, 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 wee. We both had a good laugh then. That day was a day of several firsts. First time I saw a man die. First time I tasted beer. And the first time I realized that my father was a human being. I'm sure most children get that moment of clarity when they see their parents on some equal measure. That they aren't these infallible beings that dispense amenities and wisdom, and sometimes discipline. That they are the same as us, and in that moment, we decide whether or not to be like them. I think I did him proud, all things considered. I wasn't much for business, and ended up selling the family trade to some big conglomerate. After the sale, my wife decided it was time for her to take her half and seek out more exciting locales. She promised to keep the family tradition a secret, not that anyone would believe her, though. You see, these men don't exist, not as far as the IRS is concerned anyway, and she was happy as a clam to never talk about it or witness it ever again. We didn't have any children. We tried, but that's how it goes sometimes. Lupus, the doctor called it. So I retired early and took to staying out here most of the year. Kind of like my old great-granddaddy, just roughing it. Although I've since made some improvements to the place. I have satellite internet, a solar array, and a little greenhouse where I grow vegetables and other recreational plants. So I've had plenty of time to ponder this mystery that I've inherited. According to a few websites, this area has what is called an electromagnetic vortex. People into crystals and New Age stuff think it has some kind of deeper meaning. Folk that go to Sedona to cleanse their chi or whatever would find all this a bit terrifying, though. No matter what I learn, however, it just leads to more questions. It turns out Google doesn't know everything after all. And then I discovered another clue. I noticed this a few years ago as the box had gotten rather full. I've added about 20 of them or so myself, so maybe just being all packed in there had situated them just right to kind of fuse like this. Took me a couple hours to put them all together, which resulted in a flat rectangle of smooth dark stone, veined with no obvious pattern, minus one corner chunk. I'm not sure what to do, though, as I sit here rolling the last piece to the puzzle in my hand. For the first time since I've been easing the man's way to the hereafter, he said something that I could sort of understand. He said it a few times, before resuming his awful, tortured howling. Then I shot him between the eyes. What I think he said was, "Don't finish it." Curiosity is a hell of a thing, though, isn't it? I wonder what he chose to do. I'm sure it worked out fine, but I'm curious what you think about it. I do appreciate feedback, so if you'd like to reach out, you can email me at Eli, @exitlightpodcast.com. And not just for feedback. If you'd like to contribute somehow, creatively or monetarily, I am terribly interested. Thank you for listening. Until next time, good night.